All right.
Okay.
So Juhi and I are discussing the complicated account logic between VS Code extension and language server. And we forgot to record the first time around we've done this. And now I'm just going to try to do a quick recap. So I started with discussing that we have this project and repository object that is at the core of the desktop implementation of the VS Code extension. It maps between GitLab project, which is the API response that gives us details about the project. And when I use project, I mean in this uh, whole introduction, I mean the GitLab project, the thing that we call project in the GitLab instance. Nothing else. I'm not talking about open folders or workspaces or anything else. When I say project, I really mean GitLab project. And then we have a account and Git remote pointer, which pretty much points to the GitLab to the Git repository and to the remote URL. I was explaining how you can reach a situation where there are many possible GitLab projects for a single Git repository. And the way how that can happen is when you, where is my terminal? When you have multiple remotes that are all backed by a valid GitLab project. The good example is here when we have our security fork, we have renovate fork, there is the original extension project and my personal fork. All of those are valid projects. And so if I clear selected projects here and I select a project, I get offered the VS Code extension makes the API calls to fetch the GitLab project and offers me to connect my Git repository with these accounts that are here in the parentheses and with these GitLab projects that are identified by these namespaces. And so that's how you can have multiple projects for a single Git repository and also multiple accounts for how you can select from multiple GitLab projects or GitLab accounts for the same Git repository that you just opened. Now, another tricky thing is that you can open multiple folders like we did here, and then it can happen that this language server project is now in this triplet looks like this. I have a language server folder. That's a Git repository that would be represented by this. The language server folder has only one. The language server folder has only one remote. Okay, two remotes. But for some reason, it's okay. That explains it. I already back in the day I selected the
Mm.
the project here as well. So here I can also select because I have two remotes.
Mhm.
It will offer me probably four because it does permutation of all the accounts versus all the remotes. So here I say I want language server to be backed by the GitLab org extensions, GitLab language server, but by this account, Vic Thomas. That's my work account. I click on that. But then I can go here in the extension and I can say I want it to be backed by the threat tester test account. That's the second account that I have on the same instance. And now I have two of these triplets that are active in my extension. One of them points to the VS Code extension project. It points to my thread account, thread testing account, and the project. Sorry, it points to the folder of the VS Code extension. It uses the thread account, and it's backed by the GitLab or GitLab VS Code extension project. Then we have the second triplet, which points to the folder of the language server repository. It is backed by my work account, and it uses the origin origin project in the GitLab instance. So, and now you want to ask anything, Juhi, or can I?
Oh, continue,
I thought
please.
it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now then we discussed how the logic for selecting active account and active project is very much dependent on which file you've got open. So now if I have a file open from the language server, I would be using my work account as an active account, and I would be using the language server project as an active project. However, if I switch to this editor and it's the active text editor has a file from the VS Code extension, I would be using the thread account and the VS Code extension as an active project, an active account. Then from this, we moved into how the account gets to a language server. And that's where it gets tricky because we had it somewhere here, I think, not just a language server client wrapper, that's the file actually. And there is a method called sync config. And this method is called when we initialize the extension. And then it's called on several events, like when you change configuration or change or remove add account or change account, for example, when you refresh the OAuth token. And at all of these points in time, the extension looks at the active file, and that's the base URL, which can be different. Now, in this example, I'm using both accounts are on gitlab.com, but nothing says that they have to be. It could be one account on some self-managed instance, and one account can be on gitlab.com. And so based on the active account, based on the file that you just selected, it sends the instance URL and token for the account. And then also it sends, like the extension sends the project, which was somewhere here. I saw it. Project path. It sends the project path to the language server. And then I went on. So the problem here is that this can happen at any point in time. And it's like for all intents and purposes of the user, it's non-deterministic. They don't know that they should have this file open and then do some action to trigger sync config. So it's non-deterministic. It could be one or the other. I was saying how the problem with accounts I'm going to remove in two milestones, this one and the next one. And we will have only a single account per the whole window. So that's going to be solved problem. There's going to be only one account. This is going to be a deterministic and right information that's being sent to language server, the instance URL and base and the token. But the project, however, won't be. We are not removing support for multiple projects. So there is always going to be the possibility that like you just triggered sync with language server when you had this file open. And so when we send the project path, we are sending the language server project path into, and by the project path here, that means that's the namespace. That would be GitLab org / editor extension / GitLab LSP here, or the namespace of the extension if I had this file on. So what I'm saying is that based on what file I have active, we are going to be sending different project namespace to language server, but that's not right. We have two projects open and the language server should be able to work with both. I was then drawing here a scenario when we have two accounts and we have two Git repositories. Each Git repository has remotes that point to two different GitLab projects. And I was then explaining how you will pass, like in the VS Code, this is the VS Code extension, and the user has to select. They have to say, I want to use account A1 for the window. I want to use project, I want the folder 1 to be backed up by GitLab project R1. I want the folder 2 to be backed up by project RB. They have to do this disambiguation, but otherwise it won't, like we want, you saw what happens when you don't select the project. We just show the project has not been selected and we are not supporting it, nothing. It doesn't work yet. This is just indication that the user has to do something before it starts working. So the user does have to disambiguate it. But then the problem comes with the language server, where we will definitely pass the right account. That's a solved problem. And 2 milestones from now, that's a solved problem. But this is the selection of the GitLab project that's backing up the folder, what is called both in VS Code and in language server protocol, it's called workspace. So I probably should call it workspace. Workspace 1 and workspace 2. And so what is figuring out which GitLab project backs up which workspace is non-trivial. It's not a solved problem. And I was just suggesting to you to hear that like there is going to be some trade-off to be made in this if we want to support multiple projects. And I was suggesting that maybe the initial iteration could be throwing an error or like stop not working if these projects have multiple remotes or multiple remotes that are valid GitLab projects. I don't know how far we would want to take it. But so the language server would pretty much do this. It would decide if there is only one. Let's say that there is a scenario that there are only one, then it would work because there is no ambiguity. And then when the client sends, a request saying scan workspace 1/file B txt, this wouldn't be a problem. It knows, okay, so I need to communicate with this instance and say that I want to scan file from R1. Are we sending the content of the file for scanning?
Yes, and then the thing is we actually only allow scanning on active file. So I'm curious, does that mean language server should have had the correct project path now? Or it could still be
No,
non-determined? Okay,
it could be still in the wrong because
I
the
see.
thing is like the sync doesn't happen on every command. The sync happens
I
like
see.
every now and then. And
I
so
see. Mm-hmm.
uh, the sync might have happened when we had a workspace 2 active
Mm-hmm.
here, but
I
then
see.
we are working with workspace 1. So that's not no guarantee. Like we
I
could
see.
another trade-off
Mm-hmm.
could be that you send the active project with the GitLab project with the file,
Mm-hmm.
like you would create a custom command, and as a
Mm-hmm.
payload you would pass it the project. But that's a hack that would like
Mm-hmm.
we would pay for it in the future. That's not what we really want to do. And every client
Mm-hmm.
would have to do this. Like every
Every, yeah.
JetBrains, Visual Studio,
Mm-hmm.
NeoVim, everything would have to do that if we like anything, any logic that we move on to the client, we will implement multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
So
See. Mm-hmm.
that's that. So what I'm thinking is that like if we create this restriction,
Mm-hmm.
then we are golden. Like we will, if we restrict the workspaces to only one remote and otherwise the feature stops working for now,
Mm-hmm.
that would be um, good.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a future step, we could do where there is this disambiguation present, we could
Mm-hmm.
pass it in the config. Say for this workspace, the user decided that they want to use this GitLab project as a
Mm-hmm.
like the backing project. For this
Mm-hmm.
workspace, user decided that they want to use this GitLab project. That wouldn't be hard to implement. We would put it in this config that we've got here, and that would make good sense. And it could be
Mm-hmm.
progressive enhancement. If the client sends this information,
Mm-hmm.
the feature will start working even when there are multiple projects possible for each
Mm-hmm.
folder or workspace. And if they don't send the config, the feature would stop working in that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
See.
that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
I,
Cool.
yeah. I don't know what's the exact interface of this of the API endpoint. Whether
Mm-hmm.
we could get away with not knowing the project, like if you just, but I think that it wants to know what
Mm-hmm.
project the file is from, I assume, and
Mm-hmm.
that we don't know. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
also take a screenshot of this, and I guess you can stop the recording, Julie. We can
Yes.
post this somewhere on the YouTube so people